It's a week and a half now since I finished the UTMB in Mont Blanc. 114 or so miles it turned out to be in the end, round the beautiful mountain of Mont Blanc and the whole massif there, starting and finishing in Chamonix. We go every year, as you know if you watch my films, and this is the first time I've done the big dance, the main race. Now, when we came back from Chamonix, I immediately got very ill indeed, and it turns out that it was COVID. Now, whether I was suffering with the beginnings of COVID during the race, I don't know, but I've been very ill for a week, and it's only now I've started to feel a little bit more myself. So I am starting to wade through all the footage that I filmed out there, but in the meantime, I thought today what we'd do is go through the race in detail and have a look at some of the highs and lows, what I did right, what I did wrong. So this will be a little bit of a deep dive into the UTMB race from a week and a half ago. Specifically, we're going to talk about training, we're going to talk about clothing, camera gear, other gear, nutrition, my race strategy, and how the race actually went. So let's get into it. Let's start with how my training went. I'm not going to spend a long time on training because if you follow the channel, you know all my training is documented on Strava, and of course there was a weekly video for 8-9 weeks documenting all my training. So go and watch the training diaries, the training videos, and go and have a look at my Strava. You'll see exactly what my training was like. Now, it wasn't a massively long training block. I started on June the 25th and it was about 100k per week and around about 1,000, just over 1,000 meters of elevation for 3 or 4 weeks. Then I started to up the distance. We went up to 130k for a couple of weeks and upped the elevation as well. So I was trying to do around 2,000 meters of elevation. In terms of elevation, that's not a lot. I know some people pointed that out in my Strava and on my YouTube videos. The elevation that I have done is not an awful lot, and really ideally I'd want to do a lot more. I'd want to be getting out to Chamonix or up to Wales or Scotland to climb some bigger hills, but unfortunately with family and work and whatever, it's difficult to do that. So I had to make do with the small hills that we have here in Sussex, but I did my best and I tried to get as much elevation in as possible. Also, it's worth bearing in mind that back in May we ran 100 miles on the Thames Path. Then back in June we ran 100 miles over the South Downs Way, and then in August the final big week of my UTMB training was the North Downs Way 100 race with Victoria. So there's that to factor into my training, and following the North Downs Way I had a week off, really a week of recovery, and then we were straight into Chamonix. We had a week of hiking, so I'm counting the hiking that I did during that pre-week as part of my training, and then the week of the race, virtually no running at all, just one little shakeout run. You might have seen the video with Lloyd and Ben Parks and Sarah. We went out for a little shakeout run on the Wednesday before the run. So that's my training. That was it. About 8, 9, 10 weeks worth of training, but we also add in those 3 100-milers that I did, which I hope added and contributed to the training, but also the North Downs Way 100 may possibly have still been in my legs come race day. And as I said on the videos at the time, I wouldn't recommend doing a 100-mile race as part of your training for a 100-mile race. So that was my training. Moving on to kit. Now, of course, with any big race like this, there is mandatory kit. So kit that you have to carry with you. Things like waterproof trousers, also dry under trousers as well as waterproof trousers, spare warm layer, things like that. All of that stuff, and most of that stuff, is packed in my bag and doesn't get touched, really, unless the weather really becomes extreme. I won't put any of that stuff on. So in terms of other kit, well, you saw the vest, the Zwift vest, the orange Zwift vest that I always wear, and also my compression shorts. You know I don't like flappy shorts. I do like tight shorts that keep me all compacted and in, and I do like the feeling of compression that I get from those shorts. So nothing special about those. However, there was a bit of a change this year with socks. Now, I am a big fan and have always been a big fan of Injinji socks. I pretty much wear them for every race I do. However, a change this year. When we went to the expo at Chamonix, we passed by the Drymax store and we got collared into a conversation with the guy from Drymax who convinced us to spend an inordinately large amount of money on some Drymax socks with the promise that they would be better than Injinjis, that they would prevent blisters and would be good for over 100 miles of running in the mountains. So I purchased these. So these are my Drymax socks. They are they're literally about 50 quid, $50. I think we got them from around about 35, 40 UK pounds. The Drymax socks there. And I have to say, yes, they were absolutely brilliant. Drained very well, very comfortable to wear, and certainly after I'd finished, 114 miles, your feet aren't going to be perfect at the end. I did have one fairly bad blister on my heel, but other than that, no bad blisters. Very impressed with these. If you do fancy spending £40, $50 or so, on some Drymax socks, then I can highly recommend them. They did me proud on the day, so I'm very pleased with those. So that was one change, and then the other change was I have always in the past 5 or 6 years used the Salomon Pace belt around my waist to carry sundry items. Sometimes I'd also carry my poles, my phone would go in there, sometimes a camera would go in there, and also my little microphone pack would go in my Salomon Pace belt. Now, the zip on it has been broken for a while. I've not really worried about it, but I did change this year. So this year I bought myself the Ultra Aspire belt, and this has been a belt that has been lauded by a lot of runners. I don't know if you have heard of it before, but the Ultra Aspire race belt is what I wore this year for UTMB, and absolutely perfect. Sat on my hips very well, carried my poles very well, carried my phone very well, carried my camera very well. Absolutely perfect. Haven't got a bad word to say about it. Didn't ride up, didn't ride down. The only thing I did find was that these elastic straps, to put my poles in, you can basically pull and tighten the strap. So I don't know if you can see that there. You pull that and it tightens up. I found that it did come a bit loose holding my poles, so I had to double wrap it around my poles. But once I double wrapped it, it was absolutely fine. So those were the main things in terms of what I was wearing on my body. I did have my Montane fleece in my backpack, and I did take that out a couple of times to wear when it got cold on the top of some of the climbs. I didn't wear my waterproof jacket once. It didn't rain. It wasn't cold enough, so I had that back in my backpack, but I didn't wear it. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of mandatory kit and clothing that I was wearing. But in terms of other stuff that I carried with me, of course, I've got my poles. Now, the interesting thing about these, something Victoria discovered for the first time, because she borrowed my poles when she did OCC. Standard Z-frame poles, so they fold up neatly in your bag. They're very light. These are my Lecky carbon poles. So the thing that people love about these is the glove, or the wrist strap. You tighten it with the Velcro there, and this glove stays on your hand the whole time. There's a left and a right, and it tells you left and right on there. And what you do is you press this button here and pull, and the glove comes away from the pole. And that's fine. That's it if you want to put your poles away, but you keep the gloves on. And then it's very easy when you want to put the poles back on. You just take the little loop, and slot it over and clip it back onto the pole. Now sometimes it's quite tight, but that's quite good because you know that means they're not gonna fall off. They can be a little bit tricky to pull off, but in general, they're relatively straightforward. This is a game changer though, because what it means is you don't have to hold on to the pole. So as you're climbing up a mountain, let me just get that back on, you can essentially have your hand free like this. You don't have to grip. Gripping is a stress on your arms, stress on your muscles and your tendons. If you're doing that for, well, I was on the road for 44 hours, nearly 45 hours. If you're gripping poles for nearly 45 hours, that is not good for your wrist. It's not good for your muscles. It's going to increase the tension in your body. It's going to increase your fatigue. If you can get away with just loosening your hand, relaxing your hand, and just allowing it to press down on the pole so you can push up on the mountains, but without having to grip, that's really going to help you out, and it does. So that's what I did. That's what I used on the mountains in Chamonix. My Lecky carbon poles, Z-frame poles. The other piece of kit, of course, arguably the most important piece of kit, is what was I wearing on my feet. Now, you know, if you watch the channel, that for many years I've been a huge Hoka fanboy. I've worn the Mafate Speed. I wore those at CCC. For many years I wore the Evo Speed Goat, which I absolutely loved. Had 2 iterations of those. And more recently I've been wearing the Speed Goat 5s, which I also absolutely loved. However, I have changed again this year, and we've gone with the carbon plated Hoka shoe, the Tecton X2. So I didn't have the original Tecton X, but I've gone with the X2. Carbon plated shoe, Hoka's carbon plated shoe. Now, whether I move fast enough over the ground to warrant a carbon plated shoe is another discussion entirely. How did they work for me? Absolutely brilliant. Fit perfectly. The difference between these and the Speed Goats I found is the toe box is wider, and that's a really good thing for me. I like having a bit more splay in my feet, so the wider toe box of the X2 has been brilliant. They were absolutely fine for the whole 100-mile race around UTMB, around the TMB. The only thing I would say is the grips on the bottom, the Vibrant sole, and the lug depth is slightly shallower than the Speedgoat 5s, and for UTMB that's relatively okay because generally the ground is very runnable, very easy, and that you're not going to come across a lot of mud. You will come across some mud, but not loads, and not enough really to make these suffer badly. So they lasted fine. I was very pleased with them. Yeah, I'll continue to wear the Hoka Tecton X2. If you are running on particularly muddy terrain, then I'd probably recommend something with deeper lugs. Other items worth mentioning, well, the Vega cap had to come out, of course. I wear this quite a lot. I do vary with other caps, but the Vega cap is great. It's soft, it's easy to kind of fold up into a ball if you need to put it away. It's light, it's comfortable. So the Vega cap was on most of the time. There was a funny moment where I saw on the footage that I've got that I was wearing it inside out. I was so tired. And of course, the backpack. So I wear the Salomon Sense Pro 10. So this is getting a bit old now. It's got a bit of a hole in it there. So that's my Salomon Sense Pro 10 vest. Pockets at the front, zip pockets. I keep my my medicines in there, my paracetamols and things. Pockets for water bottles, zip pockets at the front, which I keep various things in, including my light for nighttime videoing. So yeah, the Sense Pro 10 has done me well for many a race. Very comfortable, and very stretchy fabric as well, so you can get a lot more than you imagine. You can get into that backpack there. Now I also have the Salomon quiver. Now, do I use it for my poles? Actually, no, not a lot. I tend to wear my poles around my waist. What does go in the Salomon quiver, I mean, the poles do go in there sometimes, like especially at the end of the race when I don't need them anymore, I'll pack them away. But what actually goes in here more often than not is my 360 camera. So we're going to talk about camera gear in a second, but that is my 360 camera, and that goes most of the time in the Salomon quiver. And the poles go around my waist. So that's my backpack. A couple of things to note about the backpack as well. When you get your kit checked and you go to get your number and register for the race, they will give you two things to put on your back. One is a timing chip. So this is the UTMB timing chip. Don't know if that comes into focus. There we go. Whenever you pass through a timing section, you have two timing chips. This one here on your backpack and this one here on the back of your race number. So there's my race number for UTMB, and on the back there is this timing chip here. So you have two timing chips to make sure that not only are you going over, but your backpack and your kit is going over at the same time. You never know, somebody might get a mule to carry their backpack for them, and they'd be able to tell that because you would go, your backpack and you would go over at different times perhaps. Anyway, it's just a security thing, and also if one fails as well. And also on the back you've got your name and a flag, so people know where you're from and what you're called. And then, of course, because we're out on the trails for so long, quite a lot of people lie down on the side of the trails and go to sleep. Now, if you are an upstanding citizen, you might worry that these runners are not okay and wake them up and say, are you all right? So there's this handy little thing here, look, that says, don't disturb me, I'm sleeping. And you're supposed to turn that over when you lie on the trail so that people know that you're perfectly fine, you're just sleeping, do not disturb. So one of the other things I wanted to show you was my Salomon soft flasks. You'll be familiar with these if you run in the mountains or you do any kind of trail running or ultra running. You'll have these Salomon soft flasks, or at least you'll have seen them. What many of you may not have seen is one of these. So this is a filter, a water filter, and it sits in your Salomon soft flask. And of course, this allows you a bit more freedom than just getting water from the aid stations. It means you can stop at rivers and streams, and using this handy little clip here, you can hold on to that and fill up your water bottle, knowing that the filter will stop you getting any diseases, infections from the water. Now, the Alp water is, I mean, it's pretty much glacial. It's going to be very, very fresh, but obviously other places, other races that you might do may not have quite such fresh water running down off the mountains. And I know that when we did Val d'Aran, a lot of people got sick because they were drinking the river water, which they assumed was glacial, and it may well have been, but it was also mixed with a lot of iron ore, and quite a few people got very sick from drinking unpurified river water. So having one of these, having these filters in your bottles is really good for that. The bad thing about it is you can't put anything else other than water in there. Fizzy drinks are not going to go in there. You know, any other kind of drink, milk, tea, whatever you want, you can't put that in there. So that's one of the downfalls of having the filters. But in general, I think they're a really good thing. Now, a lot of you ask me quite regularly, what camera do I use to film my races? And the answer to that is always changing, to be honest with you. However, I have had one 360 camera that has stayed with me for quite a few years now, and it will change soon because it's getting quite old. The battery is starting to expand a little bit. But this is a 360 camera. By that I mean it has two lenses, one on this side and one on this side, which means it can capture a full 360 degree view. You may well have heard of the Insta360 cameras. They're the more kind of budget, consumer-friendly 360 camera. This cost me quite a lot of money a few years ago, but like I said, the battery is starting to expand a bit now, and I did find on this race that occasionally the battery died on me and I had to recharge it a couple of times. But generally, this is what I have been using over the years to film my races, on a big long selfie stick as well. So that comes down quite small and fits either around my waist or, as I said earlier on, fits into my quiver. The battery on that will, I mean, when it was good, it would last really well for a whole 100-mile race, 30, 40 hours. Obviously not continuously filming, just filming occasionally, filming things that I thought were interesting, not filming for too long, making sure that I am kind of sparing with my filming, so I don't have too much footage to film to wade through at the end, but also to preserve battery life and make sure that I've got a continuous stream of footage from the beginning of the race to the end of the race and not running out halfway through. But the other camera that I use regularly now as well is this little GoPro Mini. So most people will be using the standard GoPro. That's the one with the screen. Now the reason I chose this is, well, you might imagine it's smaller, it's lighter, it fits in my backpack, it fits in my race belt, it fits in my pocket. Sometimes I'll take this arm off and I'll just carry the camera on its own and just put it in a pocket. So that's the good thing about it. The bad thing about it is framing. Quite often I'll look into the camera and I can't be quite sure where I am in the frame. So that's one thing about having a screen where you can see how well positioned you are in the frame. But I've learned to live with that. I think it's worth the compromise for the weight of the camera. Battery life is very good. I did run out of battery life on this around 35 hours into the race this time. I did have a battery pack, but instead of charging this, I charged my 360 camera with it. So I carried two cameras, this and the 360 camera. I carried a battery pack and cables in order to charge them when they ran out, and it was also to charge my phone if my phone needed recharging. So that was that in terms of camera gear. I did also film a little bit on my phone. So I've got 3 different sets of camera footage to wade through for this video, as well as footage from the camera that we're filming on now, the Sony A7, which Victoria used at the end of the race to capture me coming into the finish. So 4 different sets of footage, and I didn't use the drone at all. I did have the drone with me, but I didn't put that in the sky at all during the whole time. So that would have been one extra bit of footage as well to add to the melee of footage that I have to wade through for this video, which will be coming out in around about 3 or 4 weeks. I think I'm gonna take my time to get through it and make sure I've got a decent edit together before I release it. I'm not going to rush it out, so it will be from now 3 or 4 weeks, I think, before that video is finally complete. Let's move on to GPS watches. I'm in the fortunate position that I do have 2 or 3 different watches that I can choose from, and this time I decided to go with the Enduro 2, so the Garmin Enduro 2, and the Garmin Fenix 7X Pro. On my wrist right now, this is the Garmin Epix Pro. So I actually took this off and left it at home or in the chalet. I didn't use this at all. Reason being, the battery is not quite up to the job. So this has a very bright, colourful screen, but that does kill battery life. So I decided I would not wear this. The Enduro, that has an enormous battery life, 80-90 hours at least on standard GPS mode. So I had that, and then the Fenix 7X Pro, that has a battery life well over 50-60 hours, again on standard GPS mode. What I wanted to do was make sure that I had a watch that was going to last the whole distance and a backup in case one of them failed. So that's why I wore 2 watches. I loaded the GPX file for the route onto one of the watches, and the brilliant thing about that is that my watch has something called Climb Pro. Now, if you're not familiar with Climb Pro, what it does is it breaks down all the climbs and all the descents of your race listed on the GPX file. And if you go to the section, the Climb Pro section, it will show you what's the next climb coming up, or what is the climb that you are currently on, how far is it in terms of distance, and how high is it in terms of elevation gain? How far have you climbed through that climb? How much elevation have you got left to climb? Really useful, really handy. You do find though, when you're running, you're constantly going, oh no, 400 meters left to climb. And then you'll go a bit more, oh no, 395 meters left to climb. And you're constantly looking, willing the meters away as you climb up a hill. But it's really good. So I had that on one of the watches, and then I didn't put navigation on the other watch to preserve battery life, to make sure that at least one of those watches would survive the whole race. So that's it, the Enduro 2 and the Phoenix 7X Pro on my left and my right wrists. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition, hydration, and my strategy for that during the race. Now, I like to think I'm relatively easygoing in terms of nutrition. I don't carry a lot of my own food. I'm not picky about having a specific type of food, a specific type of powder or gel or something that I have to have. Nothing is a no-go for me particularly. I do tend to stay away from too much sugar and too much acidy type food, too much orange and things like that, too much acid in my stomach I don't want, and I don't want a lot of sugar, so I certainly don't take gels. Again, if you know me, if you know this channel, you'll know I don't eat gels. Even in marathons, gels are just not something that work for me. They don't sit well on my stomach, and I think too much sugar, I think a lot of runners over egg the sugar. They just have too much sugar and it sits on the stomach and causes gastric problems, and it's the quickest way to get yourself DNF from a race. Now, that said, by no means am I somebody who doesn't have any gastric issues. I do regularly throw up in races. I do regularly have gastric problems, but I think I'd have a lot more if I ate too much sugar. So I tend to steer clear of too much sugar, and I go for the savoury items. So if you've watched my 100-mile races recently that I've done with Victoria, you'll know I like the Marmite and cheese sandwiches. I like packets of crisps. So bread is not bad. Soup, pasta, those kind of things. On big long races, those savoury foods do me well. And of course, bread and pasta are packed with carbohydrates, slow release carbohydrate that will fuel your run. But I'm not also naive enough to think that I don't need some fast acting sugar. So I'll regularly drink Coca-Cola or Red Bull or something like that. I will buy fizzy drinks when I come to cafes. But I also like my milk. I like coffee. I like ice cold milk. And milk is one thing that does seem to settle my stomach. When I was in the UTMB race, I did put some milk, UHT milk, but milk in my not in my backpack, in my drop bag for Courmayeur. So I had milk in my backpack at Courmayeur, and that really did help and settled my stomach a lot. So I definitely did rely almost 99% on the aid stations. As part of mandatory kit for UTMB, you do have to have some calories with you. You do have to carry some calories. So I had some bars. I think I had some Snickers bars and a Knack bar that I picked up free from somewhere. And I think I took 1 or 2 bites from them at some point. But in general, I relied on the aid station. So on my list of things, I ate cheese and bread, chocolate, noodle soup. I did have watermelon, coffee, Coke and milk. So that's what I've got listed on my list of things that I ate. And if you watch the video when it comes out, you'll see the things that were available at the aid stations. Now, in general, early on in the race, that worked fairly well for me, but I did start to get stomach problems as the race went on. And then as the race heated up during the day, I got more stomach problems. I did throw up 3 or 4 times during the race, race. It wasn't an ideal race in terms of nutrition. Hydration wise, I was drinking Coke and coffee at the aid stations, milk at my halfway point. I also stopped at a couple of cafes and purchased some coffee, and also some lemon fizzy drink at a couple of cafes as well, which went down very well. There was a point during the race where even drinking the water from my soft flasks was making me feel unwell. And what I would do is I would sip a little bit of water from the soft flask, swirl it around my mouth, and then spit it out again, or let it I was so hot, so just let it dribble on my face, or blow it out into the wind and have it all blow back on my face. These are some of the things that I do in a race. I just couldn't get many things to settle in my stomach at all for the majority, I would say, of the race. Maybe the first 20 miles was okay, and maybe the last 20 miles was okay, but the middle part, it was not a good race for nutrition and hydration. So let's start going through the race bit by bit. We won't spend forever on this, but just to take you through the main checkpoints, how I was feeling and how things were going at the various points during the race. So the race starts in Chamonix. Amazing atmosphere, as it always is. I've never started a UTMB race in Chamonix. It was superb. I've been there many times in the crowd watching it happen, but hearing the music and being in the crowd and going under the start line is just phenomenal. It is the best race start in the world, bar none. London Marathon, Berlin Marathon, what other races have I done? All the other races that I can think of. Paris Marathon is a fantastic start, but nothing compares to the start at UTMB. And you run from there on a fairly flat route. It's not completely flat, it is lumpy, but you run on a fairly flat route about 8 kilometers to the town of Les Houches, where you then start a gradual climb and then up to your first climb, which takes you up and over and down into the village of Saint-Germain. Now, the climb itself is relatively benign, and you do that as the sun is setting, as the sun is going down. I felt comfortable. It was a good start to the race. No problems at all. Although, I suppose even at the beginning, I felt like maybe I wasn't moving as quickly as I could have been moving, but I would have just put that down to me taking it easy and getting myself slowly into the race. The descent into Saint-Germain is absolutely, Saint-Gervais is absolutely horrendous. It's really steep. It's arguably the steepest descent of the race, which is lucky that it's early on. So you come down there and you had to stop. I had to stop halfway down to put my head torch on. So it was nighttime by the time we got to Saint-Gervais. The crowds are out in force in Saint-Gervais. Saint-Gervais is absolutely buzzing. A really good atmosphere. Crowds lining the streets as they are in Chamonix when you leave there. So that's a really good send-off to your first major climb. So I got to Saint-Gervais within, I suppose, two and a half hours, something like that. And I felt okay. Again, stopped at the aid station, had some bread and cheese, and made my way onto the first really big climb, going up to Col du Bonhomme. Now, this is quite a technical climb as well. When you get a bit higher into the climb, it's quite technical. But I immediately found that I was tiring on the climbs. Not to the extent that, I thought, gosh, I can't do this. There was no sense of I'm not going to make it round. I just thought, gosh, I'm going quite slow here. So anyway, I headed up, and the top of Col du Bonhomme is 2,500 meters. It's not quite the highest point of the race, but it's pretty near. It's not far off the highest point of the race. And there was snow on top of the col. It was the middle of the night, probably about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was snow on the top. It was quite a technical climb to get there. So there's a big long descent down from Col du Bonhomme to the next aid station, which is Les Chapeaux. The cut-off there was about 5:15 and I made it there at 5 to 4, so well in time. I was quite happy, and on I went into the night. My stomach wasn't great already though at this point. I didn't know why. I was finding that I was having just mild stomach problems, feeling a little bit nauseous, but it was cold. So normally in the cold weather, I don't have stomach problems. It's only when it gets hot. So I was a little bit confused about that. As day started to break, I made my way up to the top of the next climb, which was Col de la Seine. At the top, there was virtually no view at all. It was cloud cover. But as I made my way down, we went down to an aid station I know very well, Lac Combal, which is an aid station also on TDS. And when I got there, I decided to have some soup. Now, unfortunately, the soup was too salty, and it was my first instance of throwing up. So I threw my guts up at Lac Combal, but that did make me feel a whole lot better. And there's a nice flat section then running along by the lake and by the river to get to the next little climb. So I managed to run that quite well. And then it was a big long climb. Now, by now, the heat of the day was starting to appear, and this climb really did me in. It's the final climb before you drop down to Courmayeur, and Courmayeur is kind of the halfway point. It's where you get your drop bag. And I really struggled on that climb. I was also a bit disappointed because I was now well behind the kind of time that I had in mind for myself. Now, if we're talking about race strategy, I suppose I had an A, B, and C goal. So the A goal was 35 hours. That was the goal that I was looking for if I had a brilliant race. I was already nowhere near that. I would have had to have been in Courmayeur as day was breaking. So that's how far behind I already was. The next goal was to get under 40 hours. Now I think I was still on for around about that at this point in the race. And then the B goal was just to finish. The C goal was just to finish. So B goal 40 hours was still looking okay at this point. I made it down to Courmayeur, so it was hot. Again, this is a part of the course I know quite well because this is where TDS starts. So you start in Courmayeur and you head up the same path. With UTMB, you're coming the opposite direction. And so I made it down to Courmayeur. I was quite happy generally, but I did need the milk that was in my backpack. I could drink loads of that milk and it didn't make me throw up at all. So that was certainly one thing that I could keep in my stomach. I was quite happy to drink tons of milk and my stomach was fine. I stayed in Courmayeur for about half an hour. I had some pasta as well, and I also changed my top because I was getting very sweaty and hot. So I changed my top. Not that that made much difference because 5 minutes into the next climb, I was hot and sweaty again anyway. So I did start the next climb. So the next climb, you might think it's the same as CCC because CCC starts in Courmayeur and basically does the UTMB route for the rest of the course. But they are two different climbs actually. So CCC's climb is longer and goes higher. But the UTMB climb goes basically straight up to Refuge Bertone, which is about an 800-900 meter climb out of Courmayeur. It was really hot. I took every opportunity at rivers or at water fountains to douse myself in water. Made it up to the top at Bertone and met loads of people who recognised me and said hello and that they watched the channel, and much appreciated. There were loads of people up there cheering runners on. Thank you very much to you. I think Alison was one person I remember seeing there who said that she follows me on Strava. So thank you very much if you said hello to me anywhere on the course, actually. Much appreciated. Do really like meeting you guys. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you very much for coming up and saying hi. However, the main thing I wanted to mention about Refuge Bertone, so I phoned my wife on the climb up to Bertone. And I said to her that I was having terrible stomach problems, couldn't seem to keep anything really down at all. And she said that when she was on the OCC race that she'd had some of the NAC drink. This is NAAK. You might have seen that it was one of the go-to drinks, or the drinks that was on offer from the aid stations at UTMB this year. So Victoria said that she had some of that and it sat very well on her stomach. So I thought, what the heck, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's give it a go. So I tried some of the NAC drink, and what do you think was the first thing that happened? Yeah, I threw up everywhere. So that didn't sit on my stomach at all well. I just threw it all straight up, unfortunately. So NAC did not work for me. I mean, it might work for me in the future, who knows, but I didn't try it again at all during the race. Now, between Refuge Bertone and Refuge Bonatti, there is a nice, long, relatively flat section of really good running. Many people argue it's the most beautiful section of the course because it's really nice running on a really lovely valley, grassy valley bank. And then on the opposite side is the whole Mont Blanc massif. And when it's a nice day, the full view of that is absolutely spectacular. So yeah, a lot of people say that's the most beautiful part of the course for them. And what I did was, because I was overheating, we come to a bridge at some point during that section of the run with a very fast flowing, well, not very fast, a fast flowing river of icy glacier water. And most people were just dunking their hats in or filling their bottles or splashing water on their face. I decided, as is my way, to completely strip, almost naked, down to my pants, took my socks off as well, and sat in the water and just completely drenched myself in ice cold water. Really worked a treat to cool me down. One of the main reasons for my problems with stomach issues is obviously when your body is hot and your extremities are baking, your body is sending blood to those extremities and it's ignoring digesting your food, which is why I always have these problems. So one of the main things we need to do is cool the core down, cool myself down as much as possible, and that really did help. And although it lost me some time, I think it was worth it in terms of having a bit more of a settled stomach, feeling a bit more alive, and that I could run. However, it didn't last forever, and when I got to Refuge Bonatti, I did buy coffee and a fizzy lemonade drink from the shop there, and I did phone my wife again and bemoaned to her the fact that I wasn't enjoying myself and I'd really like to quit, please. You can imagine the response I got: get on with it, you lazy arse, get this race done. So yeah, didn't really have a lot of choice and simply got on with it. The next aid station to get to was Arnova. At this point we are crossing into Switzerland. So Arnova is the last aid station before the long trek up to the top of Col Ferret, and that is the highest point of the race. It's not much higher than Col du Bonhomme, but a little bit higher. Long old climb, a little bit of snow, not loads of snow, but a little bit of snow, and I was so boiling hot. I was actually reaching to some of the snow, and where I knew it looked quite fresh, I was picking the snow and eating it on my way up the climb to Col Ferret. Once you've reached the top at Col Ferret, there is a big long downhill all the way to La Folie in Switzerland. I mean, it's huge. It's a 1,000-meter descent, maybe more than a 1,000-meter descent all the way down the hill, but it's quite runnable ground as well, so you can run it, and you'll see the elites absolutely pounding their way down that descent to La Folie. Now, you remember that I got to, I think it was La Combal just as the sun was rising, and by the time I reached La Folie, the sun had set again and it was head torches on once again. So from La Folie, I was still not feeling great. I think I'd thrown up again. I was still trying to eat little bits of cheese, little bits of chocolate perhaps. I was still able to have the odd glass of Coke. But in general, my stomach was still all over the place, even having cooled down in the night at La Foulée, and then on to Champay-Lac was the next aid station. Again, it's a very runnable section from La Foulée to Champay-Lac, or certainly to the foot of the climb up to Champay-Lac. Now, of course, I'm very familiar with this part of the course, having done CCC in 2018. And it's funny that when I got to La Foulée, I thought, right, I've only got this runnable section to the foot of the climb to Champay-Lac. Then once I've climbed up to Champay-Lac, there's only 3 climbs to go and I'm finished. And in my head, I thought by the time when I get to Champay-Lac, I thought I'm almost done. You know, this is it. I've got it. Which is funny because it's a whole other night of running to get through. I started from La Foulée in the dark, made my way down to I think the town's called Prat de la Fort, something like that. And then you climb up to Champay-Lac. So all this in the dark. It's a long climb up to Champay-Lac. Felt like it was going on forever. I was with a little group of people. My stomach, I don't think my stomach was feeling too bad at this point, but yeah, it took forever to get that climb done. Into Champay-Lac aid station, can't remember what I had to eat there, probably not an awful lot, maybe some pasta I think, but I wouldn't have eaten all of it. In fact, I think I did have a bowl of pasta, had about half of it and then threw the rest away as I couldn't stomach it. And then it's basically 3 800-meter climbs. The first climb is up from Champay-Lac over and down into the town called Trient. And by the time I'd done that, it was daylight again. So that whole thing from La Foulée up to Champay-Lac and up and over into Trient, that took me the whole night. But by now, I was starting to feel better. So that morning, I think my stomach said, okay, look, we're doing this, it's fine. So that my stomach actually settled quite well from Trient onwards. I think I was sick one more time. I think 4 times I threw up in the whole race, and the last time was just before I got to Trient. From Trient, I started to feel good as the daylight broke. However, the climb out of Trient was the steepest, pretty much the steepest climb that we did in the whole race. It was absolutely horrendous. The first part of that, it does level off a bit after a while, but the first bit of that climb is just, it's very tight switchbacks and really steep climbing, hands and knees. You know, sometimes you can't put your poles down, you've got to put your hands down to climb up to the next bit. So that was really hard work. Once we got that done, it was up and over and down into the next town of Vallorcine. And I was feeling pretty good now. My descent from the top of the climb down to Vallorcine was pretty quick. I ran that fairly well and fairly fast. But in terms of time now, I knew that I was really going to struggle. I wasn't going to get under 40 hours, and it was basically just a case of trying to minimise the damage as much as possible and try and get in as early as I could. And it is also totally a mental thing now. You're so tired, you're so exhausted that any opportunity to kind of lay back and sleep or just take it easy, you're gonna take, you know, and you have to be very strong with your mind to overcome that and say, no, we need to keep moving, we need to get going, we need to move faster if we can. I struggle with that a lot, you know, and if there's a cafe in sight, then you'll find me stopping and getting my card out and saying, just, oh, give me a coffee, please. And I do that a lot, and it's a very bad failing of mine, and it's probably lost me hours out on course before. Anyway, thank you again to some more people who met me and cheered me on and said hello in Vallorcine, and also on the climb up to La Flegere. That final climb, again, the first part of that climb, the final climb out of Vallorcine, I went as fast as I could. I really powered that climb because I knew there was a cut-off at I think 2:30 in the afternoon at the top at La Flegere, and I wanted to make sure there was no way I was going to miss that. So I absolutely powered the first bit of that climb, but then the climb got longer and longer, and even though I had it on my watch, I knew how long it was. I tired an awful lot, and I slowed an awful lot in the second half of that final climb. Eventually slowly made it to La Flegere, and yes, did stop for another coffee at the La Flegere cafe. Went straight through the aid station, didn't stop at the aid station, but did stop at the cafe to get a coffee. And then my descent into La Flegere, if you've seen my CCC video, my descent from La Flegere into Chamonix, I just powered past so many people, didn't I? Not this time. This time I started that descent very slowly. I had a drink in my hand, slowly made that descent, drinking my drink. Then as I got halfway down, I did start to speed up a bit, and there's a beautiful cafe called La Floria. Went through there with loads of people cheering. That was great fun, and ran through there, and then picked up the pace as the path became easier to run on and wider. Really started to run down, and met my wife and kids at the steps at the bottom of that climb, or that descent rather, and then they ran with me all the way through Chamonix and to the finish line. Thank you also to Matthew and to Jaco, who met us there as well and filmed me running in. Thank you to those guys, as well as Victoria for filming me running in. Listen, the time was not what I wanted by any means, and thinking about it now, I would like to go back. I really think I should be able to do under 40 hours for that race. So I will go back one day, not next year. Next year, I'm going to enter OCC next year. We'll see if I get into that. So we'll have a bit of an easier year next year, but I will enter UTMB again, and I will try and target training a little bit more specifically towards it. Maybe not do 100-mile races as my training. I finished in 44 hours and 47 minutes, so well over my A goal of 35 hours, and almost 5 hours longer than my B goal of 40 hours. Now, I have some excuses. Don't worry, there are definitely excuses. So I think I had COVID. I definitely got COVID afterwards. I was definitely very sick last week, and I'm still only recovering now. So maybe I had COVID during the run, which would explain the lack of power, the lack of aerobic power that I seemed to have in the early part of the race, when I felt I should have been going quicker. Secondly, North Downs Way 100, maybe that was still in my legs. Again, that would explain a lack of muscular power on the climbs and the descents, just not going as quickly as I wanted to. I can't really explain the stomach problems, although that might be COVID related as well. But certainly during the day when it was hot, yes, I don't run well in the heat. I have gastric issues quite regularly when I'm running in hot weather. But in the cold weather, I don't have gastric problems normally. And normally my stomach is fine. I can eat what I want, and relying on the aid stations is fine. But not this time, even during the cold. My stomach wasn't great. So whether that was COVID or whether that was just something unexplained, I don't know. But the important thing is we finished. We got the thing done. We got the darn thing completed. My first attempt at doing the full UTMB race, and we finished. So I can't argue with that. A finish is a finish. I crossed the line, and that finish line, again, best finish line in the world. Anytime you get to cross that line, you have to be grateful, you have to be thankful. And so I am. I'm so grateful and thankful to the people that helped me get there. Thank you to my wife. Thank you to everyone who supported us on the route. And beforehand, in the comments that you guys put in the YouTube videos, comments on Strava, it's all motivation. It all helps. It all makes me feel good. And that's what you want, isn't it? You want to feel good. You want to feel good and confident going into a race. And I certainly did feel like I'd done the training. Maybe some more elevation would have been useful. But certainly in terms of distance, I've done the training, I felt good, felt confident. I've done plenty of these kind of races before, so I know I can grind my way through them. I'm not quick. I'm never going to be 30 hours. I'm never going to be 30 hours on a race like this. But I think on a really good day, I should be between 35 and 40 hours. That's where I think I sit. But not this time. So there is scope, there is opportunity, there is the desire to do UTMB again in a couple of years' time, lottery permitting, of course, and see what we can do. But in the meantime, we're very happy with a 44-hour, 47-minute finish on the greatest race in the world. Some would argue not, but I think certainly the greatest start and finish line in the world, and one of the biggest trail and ultra running events in the world. UTMB, delighted to finish. And if you were out there running, I absolutely hope that you had the best race that you could possibly have imagined. And even if the race didn't go well, that you got to the finish line and that you enjoyed running through Chamonix, running through those crowds of people, cheering you in and crossing that iconic finish line. The race video will be out in 3 or 4 weeks. If you're not subscribed to the channel, then please do that now. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you on the start line next time.